When considering who Gorgeous George has had the most contentious relationship with over the years, I'd submit that his relationship with women, in general, is the most controversial. In this video, I'd like to talk about one of the many reasons behind that assertion. In psychology, it is commonly called the Madonna-whore complex. In art, it is a popular trope exemplified visually as the sacred and the profane, or as George might say it,
the sacred and the profane.
It's another psychological theory from our friend Dr. Freud, and similar to the Oedipus complex, it is something that researchers are still studying to this day, and it still has great relevance in our society. I'm sure I'm surprising no one when I say Gorgeous George Yared exhibits this complex egregiously. So let's take a look. And shout out to Hamish McIntosh for suggesting the topic. The Madonna-whore complex is a psychological theory applicable to the male mind regarding natural and learned emotions about the opposite sex. The theory argues the affected male can only see a female in black and white terms, the Madonna, or good, and the whore, or bad. It touches deep roots in civilized history. As most societies have historically been patriarchies, women as a whole have been viewed only as either a vessel for childbirth or an outlet for lust. So let's examine those two sides. First, the Madonna. The word Madonna comes to us from Italy, taken from the phrase Madonna, which means my lady. It's used as a respectful term for a woman, often also implying some form of motherhood or guardianship. As I'm sure many viewers already know, its two most prominent uses are for Mary, the mother of Jesus, and the iconic American singer of the same name. An interesting note on the contemporary Madonna, she herself chose that stage name to express the duality of womanhood in her art, the virgin versus the whore. Which leads us to the other side of the coin, the whore. This one is a little more complex conceptually. Whore is an aggressively pejorative term in our culture, and many others. I think most people will conjure up a similar simplistic image of what they consider to be a whore, which is typically a woman who is unapologetically promiscuous and morally low class. But within psychology and art, the meaning is deeper. The whore in this complex refers to a woman whose only value is her sexual ability, and therefore her worth is less than any man's. And yes, sometimes that is at face value and relates specifically to sexual promiscuity, but often, and the point to remember here is, at the heart of this viewpoint is a man who believes a woman is so morally or mentally corrupt, or simply has so little substantive value because of her gender, that her only worth in this world is her physical body. You may have also heard the term nice guy, which is slang referring to a man who acts nicely towards a woman he is romantically interested in as a ploy to win her affection, only to immediately shift to insults when the advances are rebuked by the female half. Now, this isn't Madonna-whore complex by the letter of the law. It's more so routine manipulation and immaturity, but it serves as a relevant microcosm for the thought process of the Madonna-whore complex. These men only view the women as a love interest, and when the woman makes it clear she's not interested romantically, the man seems completely unable to view the woman as a friend or even a stranger. The woman is simply now a whore. That's it. And the comedy in the nice guy meme is how quickly the man pivots from one extreme to the other. This complex doesn't exhibit that transition so quickly, but those mental gymnastics certainly exist. And George is also a nice guy. There will be a separate video on that someday too. But to sum up, a male affected with this complex sees women as black and white, saints and sinners, no in between. For George, you'll see an interesting pattern with how he views the women in his life. If they are on his side, or he wants it to appear that way, George will outright ignore facts to hold up that Madonna image. Conversely, when a woman is not in Gigi's camp, even if she had previously been, she now has no value in his eyes, and thus his attitude does a 180. So let's take a closer look at some of the females who are or have been in Gigi's life. Per usual, I will be utilizing George's own thoughts and words via recordings and screen captures to further enforce the research. Thank you as always to the goons involved, and especially the Inner Circle, for curating this content. The first woman we'll talk about is the first woman in Gigi's life. That would be his mother, who gave birth to him in 1968, and that would end up being the height of her involvement in his life. She would soon divorce George's father and drop contact with the family. She never had a hands-on role as a parent during George's adolescence. Whenever the topic of his mother comes up, George is a fervent defender of her. Now, that's not strictly a criticism of George himself, but the thing is, he has a legitimate gripe with his mother. Abandoning your child is a brutal thing to do. George has every right to harbor ill will, but he's strong fast in holding her up on that pedestal. There's an ulterior motive for this that I think is pretty clear. George cares a lot about how other people view him, and he sees his mother's honor as a reflection upon himself. So it's pretty easy to see why he holds up that Madonna image. Next, let's talk about Jamie. Certainly a complex topic in the Gigi saga. For the sake of time, I don't intend to review every adversary moment between George and Jamie because there are many. I believe the most important element in their relationship regarding this subject is just how extreme George gets in his polarizing feelings about her. When we look back at all the times that George has talked about Jamie versus talking to her via recorded voicemails or text messages, they're pretty different. In George's eyes, when he's defending her, Jamie is simply an angel. But when he's arguing with her, she is, and I'm quoting, a drug addict fucking bitch. In regards to Jamie, let's also listen to a clip in a recorded Saunders call. I think this gives good insight into George's thought process.
That was the preface of the thing, saying that I raped her. And if I raped her, whatever. So that doesn't make any sense that she was a prostitute? She's a prostitute, but yet I raped her. It doesn't hold any water.
This clip has been critiqued by goons before. George states that a prostitute can't be raped, which of course is 100% false. But you can see how George's brain works. A woman sells her body because she has no substantive character and her body is all she's good for, so therefore an unwanted assault is not a physical crime because her body is only what she has to offer, and it's not a moral crime because she is already morally corrupt. And from that, you can see the greatest danger to this complex. Clearly, George would have no issue sexually assaulting a female he views like this. To him, it's no different than engaging with a sex doll. It's what the other party's purpose is. Yet another hot topic for George. Angela is also someone we've seen him harbor polarizing opinions over. We've certainly seen much more of the negative side from George, as Angela has been a steady support for Team Goon over the years. But do remember, before Angela turned, she was someone George was infatuated with. I found this interesting moment in a Saunders call. George has what he would call a Freudian slip when talking about getting revenge on Angela for sharing info with the goons. Listen in.
Shit. Thanks to Angela. They photoshopped the shit thanks to Angela. Well, I've got a picture of Angela that I'm going to put her on Wombo and make her sing something. That bitch. Put Angela on Wombo, make her sing something degrading. I am a virgin, or no, I'm a whore, or whatever, whatever. I got to think of a song to get her to sing, because you know Wombo, right?
Isn't that interesting? I found that clip after I had already started this research. I was blown away by how surprisingly relevant it was. You heard George actually say both virgin and whore, and he initially mixed up which term to use for Angela. You can plainly see his black and white thought process about women. He pined after Angela for a while when they first met, and at this point, he was still mentally transitioning from viewing Angela as that romantic interest to how he feels about her now, that she is completely unavailable. And also, was that song he was referencing Like a Virgin by Madonna? And then there's Kristen. We do see this with how George views her as well. Although George claims he never had sexual ideations about Kristen, this is still applicable if that is true. Remember, this complex speaks to a more metaphorical sense of how a male views a woman's worth. As we've heard in so many Saunders calls, when Kristen is in Gigi's camp, he views her as a good mother. Despite everything else about her, despite her TikToks that show her kids and various paraphernalia all in the same room, George holds her up to this light as a respectful maternal figure. And of course, when George and Kristen broke apart, that all went away. She was nothing but a crazy QAnon chick. And while that isn't false, it's clear in how George talks about her that he can only see one side or the other, depending on how he feels about her in the moment. Have you seen any other examples, or any other women in Gigi's life who may have been a victim of this mindset? I know Tori Baker, Phyllis, even more recently Nurse Joy have all been victims of George's harsh, polarizing views on women. George's harsh, polarizing views on women. Well, that's it for me on this one. I appreciate you all watching, and have a great day.